Silas Shadow Creed, a bounty hunter whose name itself was a whisper of grim promise, moved through the crowded street, his stride fluid, silent, like a predator on the hunt. His eyes, sharp and dark, missed nothing, scanning the faces in the saloon and the shadows beneath awnings. He wore his worn leather coat like a second skin, a canvas for the ghosts that haunted him, a faded wanted poster, pinned to a post outside the general store, announced the price on Lily Belle's head. Silas felt the familiar cold clench in his gut, a mix of practiced detachment and the phantom ache of an old scar. He'd killed an innocent once, a mistake that had turned him into this shadow of a man. This job, this quick capture, was supposed to be easy money, a way to keep the past buried. But the poster described a woman with kind eyes, a contrast to the bad egg label. Silas knew then this hunt wouldn't be clean. The West had a way of dragging forgotten sins back into the light, and he was about to face his head-on. Whisper Gulch clung to the slopes like a burr on a saddle blanket, a collection of sun-baked boards perpetually veiled in dust. This was Silas Creed's kind of town, unremarkable, its truth hidden in unblinking stares and a humming tension. He'd ridden in silence, drawing no more notice than a tumbleweed. His gaze swept the town, sharp and dark, missing nothing. The bank bell jingled a tinny welcome as he pushed through its polished doors. Inside, the oak counter gleamed, too clean for the dust outside. Perkins, the teller, a nervous man all sweat and jitters, jumped. "Can I help you, mister?" His hand hovered, a startled bird near a hidden drawer. "Information," Silas rasped, his voice a dry leaf scuttling across stone. "On the bank robbery, Lily Belle." Perkins swallowed hard. "Ain't much to tell. She just walked in, bold as brass, no mask, pulled a tiny derringer, pointed it right at old Mr. Abernathy, said if we didn't open the vault, she'd make a mess, said it calm as you please, like asking for a cup of coffee, took the strong box and rode out." "No violence?" Silas pressed, his eyes narrowing to slits. Perkins shook his head. "None. Not a drop of blood. Just determination. And them eyes. They weren't mean, just desperate, desperate eyes." The words pricked Silas. He pushed the thought down, just a job. "Where'd she ride?" "South, most reckon. Into the desert. Reckon she's already lost to the dust." Perkins visibly relaxed. Silas turned. The bell jingled his departure. Outside, the sun beat down. He needed more. Not just facts, but truth. He walked to the edge of town where buildings thinned and hope seemed thinner still. A crude sign, faded paint. Hope's Haven, orphanage. A rickety fence, a sagging building. Children in the dusty yard, thin, ragged, their laughter a faint, fragile sound. He found Mrs. Albright, the matron. Her face, a roadmap of worry, held a steady, kind light. "You're here about Lily, aren't you?" she said, her voice firm despite the weariness. "I am," she sighed, wiping her hands on her apron. "She ain't a criminal, mister. Not truly. She's been nothing but a blessing since she came here. She's got a good heart." "Then why'd she rob the bank?" Silas's voice was flat. "Because of him!" Mrs. Albright's voice cracked. She gestured towards the imposing town hall. "Judge Cole. Jedediah Cole. He owns the bank, owns half this town. Been trying to shut us down for months. Taxes, fines. Made it impossible. Just yesterday he gave us an ultimatum. Pay up or he takes the land. These children, they got nowhere else." Silas felt a familiar cold clench, sharper this time. Judge Jedediah Cole. A hanging judge whose name tasted of merciless law, of justice stripped bare. He remembered Cole's reputation, enforcing the letter, not the spirit. And now, an orphanage. This didn't fit the neat world Silas had built, a world of clear black and white. The ghost of Silver Creek stirred. He pushed it down. Just a job. Lily, she couldn't bear it, Mrs. Albright continued, her voice trembling. She tried everything, begged, borrowed, nothing. So she did what she had to do. For them. She looked at the children, her eyes pleading. She ain't running for herself, mister. She's running for them, to buy them time. Silas looked at the children, their faces smudged, their clothes patched. He heard their faint laughter. He thought of the bounty money, the quiet peace it usually bought him, the ability to keep moving, to escape the shadows. But this time, the money felt tainted, heavier. Lily Belle, a soiled dove, turned robber for orphans. Judge Colt, a pillar of law crushing the helpless. The lines blurred. He mounted dust, his gaze sweeping the horizon south towards the desert. A long ride, a dangerous ride, not just the terrain, but what stirred inside him. Something he'd buried, finally breaking through the hardened soil. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a test. And in this ornery world, his conscience was the most dangerous kind of prey. Silas rode south, out of Whisper Gulch's dusty grasp. The land swallowed the town's faint clamor, yielding to scrub and rolling hills, then stretching flat into the desert's unforgiving maw. Heat pressed down a weighted hand, but Silas barely felt it. He was a shadow riding shadows, his purpose fixed. He moved with the land, dismounting to read the dust. Lily Belle's tracks, faint and fleeting, spoke a different tale than the wanted poster's bold print. A woman's boot, light, and then the shuffle of small, dragging feet. Children. Mrs. Albright's words echoed, "She's running for them, to buy them time." This wasn't a lone outlaw's flight, no hell-bent for leather dash into the wilderness. This was a fragile caravan. The knowledge stirred a ripple beneath his iron calm. He found their first camp, tucked in a shallow gully where lean cottonwoods clawed at the sun. A cold fire pit, scattered ash, and buried deep, a crude wooden horse, small and smoothed by tiny hands. Silas picked it up, warm against his thumb. A child's toy, not whiskey, not gambling chips. A child's horse. The ghost of Silver Creek, a little girl clutching her own doll, flared in his mind's eye. He dropped the toy, telling himself it meant nothing. Just a job. The next dawn painted the sky in cruel, fiery hues. He found an abandoned wagon, its wheel broken, canvas shredded. Inside, tucked amidst dry grass, lay a child's worn Aesop's fables, pages dog-eared, a faint rabbit drawing, Lily Belle reading by firelight to small, waiting faces. The image warred with the bad egg label, the picture blurred. As he reached a low ridge, he saw them, a tiny cluster of figures, ants against the vast, indifferent desert, moving slow, inexorable, towards distant mesas. Lily Belle, her slight frame, leading, protecting. She guided them towards a dangerous stretch of canyons, a place that swallowed men whole. A desperate gamble. He made camp that night on a high bluff, their distant fire a dying ember. He could have ended it, closed the distance, taken her. But something held him. A reluctance he couldn't name. He told himself it was strategy. But a deeper voice whispered, one that sounded suspiciously like a long-buried conscience. The wind picked up next morning, whipping dust into stinging clouds. Silas rode into the canyon's treacherous maze, the trail a labyrinth of sharp rock and sudden drops. He felt the urgency now. Time slipping like sand through a cracked sieve. Not just for Lily Belle, but for him. He needed to finish this, buy his peace, bury this unsettling feeling. He found them in a sheltered alcove. Lily Belle, face streaked with grit, green eyes wary but defiant. She comforted a coughing boy, his breath ragged. Around them, 5 or 6 children, pale, exhausted. One clutched the wooden horse. They were weary, but unbroken. Silas dismounted. His hand rested on his Colt, a familiar weight. Lily Belle looked up, her gaze steady, locked on his. No fear, only bone-deep resignation. "You found us," she rasped. "I did. They're sick," she said, nodding to the boy. "Water's bad. We're looking for a clean spring. A jolt. Bad water. A death sentence in this land." He saw the genuine worry in her eyes, the raw, fierce instinct of protection, not the cunning of a criminal. He looked at the frail children, their thin faces smudged with dust and illness. He saw the desperate eyes that haunted his nightmares. He closed his own for a breath, fighting the rising tide of memory. The girl in Silver Creek. He couldn't do it again. Not to children. Not if there was another way. He was a bounty hunter, not a damn executioner. "You're not going to take us back, are you?" Lily Belle whispered, fear finally touching her eyes. "Not with them sick." Silas looked at the sick children, at Lily Belle's tired, determined face, at the Colt on his hip. He looked at the imposing mountains. He had to make a choice, one that went beyond the bounty, beyond the cold, hard law, one that would either bury his past for good or force him to finally face it. The lines, once so clear, had blurred. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was a test, and he hadn't had one of those in a long, long time. He drew a slow breath, the dry air burning his lungs. The choice, always the choice, laid bare. "Why'd you do it, Lily Belle?" The question was rougher than he intended, a raw edge of the turmoil inside him. She looked away, towards the vast, indifferent horizon, then back at him, a spark of defiance igniting in her weary eyes. "Judge Cole," she said, the name a bitter taste. "He owns the bank, owns half this town, seems like. He's been trying to shut Hope's Haven down for months. Says we owe him back taxes, fines for this and that. Made it impossible. Yesterday he gave us an ultimatum, pay up by the end of the week or he takes the land. These children, they got nowhere else." Her voice, though quiet, was steel. "I did what I had to do, for them." Silas felt the cold clench, not from the desert's chill, but from a truth sharper than any bullet. Judge Jedediah Cole, a hanging judge, a pillar of law, but his law, it seemed, bent to his will, twisted for his gain. Silas remembered whispers, old stories from other towns where Cole had gained land, assets, always within the letter of the law, but leaving a trail of ruined lives in his wake. The puzzle pieces clicked. Cole wasn't upholding the law, he was bleeding it dry. He was a bad egg cloaked in robes. The shadow of his own past in Silver Creek deepened, the echo of an innocent life taken for a lie, for a bounty. This hunt, meant to keep his sins buried, was instead digging them up, one painful spadeful at a time. A new scent drifted on the wind. Horses, many of them, and the low murmur of voices, rough and hungry. Silas's head snapped up, his hand tightened on his Colt, the Grime brothers. He recognized their kind, vultures, drawn by the scent of desperation and the promise of easy money. No questions asked, no conscience bothered. They were pure, unadulterated predators, unlike him, with his inconvenient ghosts. Lily Belle followed his gaze, her breath catching. Her eyes, wide now with terror, flicked back to him. The choices narrowed to a single stark path. Silas looked at the sick children, then at Lily Belle's tired, determined face. He looked at the Colt on his hip, the symbol of his cold, efficient profession. And then he looked at the distant, imposing shape of the approaching riders. He knew then this wasn't just a job anymore. It was a test, and he wasn't running from it. Not this time. The dust storm hit like a judgment, a churning ochre beast swallowing the sky. It wasn't the kind of predictable gale that merely stirred the sagebrush. This was a desert god's fury, born of dry winds and a land that refused to yield. Silas pulled Lily and the children into the deepest cut of the canyon wall, the narrow opening barely wide enough to shield them from the stinging grit. The roar of the wind was a living thing, muffling all sound, isolating them in a world of blinding, choking brown. Lily, despite her exhaustion, moved with a quiet efficiency. She wrapped the coughing boy tighter in a thin blanket, her hands gentle but firm. Silas watched her. No panic, just a fierce, pragmatic will to protect. It was a mirror to something he recognized in himself, a spark he'd thought long dead. The dust bit at his eyes, but he kept them fixed on the canyon mouth. The Grime brothers were out there, vultures, and this storm, a blessing in disguise, was also their shroud. Hours bled into an eternity. The canyon became a howling tomb. Silas huddled with the children, his large frame a makeshift shield against the driving grit. Their small bodies, fragile and trusting, leaned against him. He felt their quick, shallow breaths, the trembling of their tiny limbs. He thought of the girl in Silver Creek, so small, so helpless. He'd failed her. The raw wound, buried for so long, throbbed. He wouldn't fail these. Not now. Lily, crouched beside him, whispered, her voice barely audible above the wind's shriek. "You ain't just a bounty hunter, are you?" It wasn't a question of accusation, but of weary observation, a shared secret in the eye of the storm. He didn't answer, just shifted, his body tightening. But her words, simple and direct, cut through the layers of his carefully constructed silence. She saw beyond the ace in the hole, beyond the grim facade. She saw the man beneath. A man scarred, still fighting ghosts. When the first lull came, a deceptive calm in the heart of the maelstrom, a new sound cut through the settling dust, the distant crack of a rifle. The Grime brothers. They were relentless as the storm itself. Silas's grip tightened on his Colt. His blood ran cold, then hot. This wasn't about the bounty. This was about survival. Theirs. He moved to the canyon mouth, positioning himself, a lone sentinel. Lily was beside him, not cowering but watchful. "We got to move," she breathed. "They know we're here. This ain't shelter, it's a trap." He nodded, a sharp, decisive movement. "You take the children. Head deeper into the canyons. Find the old trail, past the split rock. It leads to the dry riverbed. I'll buy you time." Her eyes, green and fierce, met his. "You'll be running with a greenhorn if you think I'm leaving you." No argument, just stubborn conviction. She pulled a small, worn derringer from her boot, its barrel glinting faintly. "I ain't just a lady." A grim smile touched Silas's lips, quick as a flicker of lightning. "Didn't reckon you were." He felt a strange lightness, a clarity born of pure, distilled danger. For years he'd run from confrontation, from the moment of truth. Now here, in the heart of the storm, facing impossible odds, he felt an unexpected peace. The ghosts, for once, were silent. They were watching, waiting. And for the first time in a long time, Silas wasn't running. He was fighting. For them. For a chance at something clean. The storm offered no quarter, only a brief deceptive lull before its full fury returned. But the Grime brothers were here, a pack of wolves sensing wounded prey. Silas stood at the canyon's mouth, a solitary rock against a rising tide of menace. He felt the cold steel of his Colt, a familiar weight, no longer a burden of memory, but a tool for survival. Lily, a shadow at his side, her derringer small but resolute, held her ground. Her presence, steadfast and unwavering, was a quiet strength he hadn't known he needed. The first figures emerged from the swirling dust, grim specters in the fading light. 3 of them, led by a brute named John Grime, his face a map of old scars and bad intentions. He was the kind of man who enjoyed the hunt, the raw fear in a victim's eyes. "Well, well," John rasped, his voice a gravel road. "Look what the wind dragged in. The great Shadow Creed turned nursemaid." A mocking laugh, dry as bone. "Step aside, Grime," Silas said, his voice low, steady, a rumble from deep earth. "This ain't your fight. Everything's our fight when there's coin on the table, bounty man." Another Grime snarled, his hand hovering over his holster. "And that little dove's got a price tag big enough to buy a slice of heaven." Lily stiffened. Silas felt the subtle shift beside him, a tension in her small frame. He knew her fight wasn't for heaven, but for hope's haven, for the fragile lives huddled behind them. The first shot was a warning, spitting dust inches from Silas's boot. Then the storm roared back, a blinding, choking wall of grit. It was chaos, dust and lead, a dance of desperation. Silas moved, a blur of motion, drawing his Colt. His first shot found its mark, a swift, clean strike that sent one of Vance's men sprawling. No hesitation, no ghost in his mind, only the primal need to protect. Lily fired, her small derringer barking, a surprising crack that whizzed past another Grime's ear. She was no marksman, but her intent was a scorching brand. She drew their fire, buying precious seconds. Silas moved, a phantom in the dust, his shots precise, deadly. He was back in the fray, where instinct ruled and only the fastest survived. But this time, it was different. Every bullet fired was a shield, not a sin. The Grime brothers, though many, were caught off guard by the fury of Silas's defense and Lily's unexpected resolve. John, seeing his men fall, let out a frustrated growl. "You ain't worth it, Creed. We'll get her in town." He turned, pulling his remaining man, and vanished into the swirling tempest. They were cowards at heart, bullies who preferred easy prey to a real fight. The silence that followed was thick, broken only by the whimpering of the children and the ceaseless howl of the wind. Lily staggered forward, collapsing against the rock face, her breath coming in ragged gasps. Silas holstered his smoking Colt, his chest heaving. He looked at her, truly looked at her, beyond the fear, beyond the dust and the gun smoke. He saw raw courage, a fierce, unwavering light. "You should have gone," he said, his voice hoarse. She pushed herself up, meeting his gaze. "And leave you? We're in this together, bounty man." A faint, weary smile touched her lips. "Besides, I told you, I ain't just a lady." The words, simple and direct, struck a chord deep within him. Together. It was a foreign concept to him, a man who had walked alone for so long. But standing there, surrounded by the dust and the echoes of gunfire, with the small, fragile lives breathing softly behind them, it felt right. For the first time, he wasn't just running from something. He was standing for something, for someone. The choice had been made. His past, for now, receded into the storm's fury. The storm raged through the night, a relentless siege. Silas and Lily huddled with the children, their bodies pressed together for warmth against the bitter cold that seeped into the canyon. The coughing boy worsened. His breath came in ragged gasps, his skin hot to the touch. Silas knew time was a cruel master in the desert, especially for the weak. "He needs real medicine," Lily whispered, her voice laced with fear. "Not just rest. We need a town, a doctor." "A town," whispered Gulch, and Judge Cole. The thought brought a cold dread that rivaled the canyon's chill. But there was no other choice. He looked at Lily, her face etched with worry, her resolve unyielding. He saw the trust in her eyes, a trust he hadn't earned but now felt compelled to protect. "We go back," Silas said, his voice flat with determination. "But not just for medicine." He looked at her, his dark eyes meeting her green ones. "We end this. For good." Lily nodded slowly, a spark rekindling in her eyes. "Judge Cole," she breathed, the name a vow. "He ain't just taking land," Silas muttered, a grim realization settling deep within him. "He's stealing lives, and he ain't gonna get away with it." The old score, the one that had haunted him since Silver Creek, had found a new, living target. Justice, real justice, was no longer just a word on a wanted poster. It was a fire in his belly. As dawn broke, thin and pale through the dissipating dust, they moved. The children, though weak, found a newfound strength, buoyed by Lily's gentle encouragement and Silas's silent, protective presence. Every step was a pact. They were headed back to Whisper Gulch, not as fugitives, but as avengers. The town slept, unaware that two shadows, one burdened by a past sin and the other by a selfless crime, were riding back to rip open its rot and bring the truth into the harsh light of the western sun. This time, the fight wouldn't be in the shadows. It would be in the very heart of the serpent's den. And Silas Creed, the shadow, was ready to burn it down. The dust of the showdown still hung heavy, but the true storm was yet to break. Silas and Lily rode back into Whisper Gulch under the pale, nervous light of pre-dawn, a quiet fury thrumming between them. The town, roused by whispers and the distant echoes of their struggle with the Grime brothers, stirred with an uneasy anticipation. Their plan was simple, brutal in its clarity. Expose Judge Jedediah Cole, not in the shadows, but in the glaring light of his own courthouse, before the very people he had preyed upon. They gathered a handful of allies first. Mrs. Albright, her eyes burning with fierce hope, Old Man Hemlock, the grizzled prospector who'd long suspected Cole's dealings, and a timid bank clerk, pushed to courage by the sheer audacity of Lily's flight and Cole's tyranny. Each carried a piece of the truth, a fragment of Cole's intricate web of lies. The clock tower struck 9. The courthouse doors, usually a bastion of order, now felt like the gates of a reckoning. Cole sat at his bench, a thin, cruel smile playing on his lips, oblivious to the storm brewing. He was presiding over a trumped-up charge against a dirt farmer, a public display of his unwavering authority. The air was thick with the scent of stale tobacco, dust, and the simmering fear of the townsfolk packed into the small courtroom. Silas and Lily entered last, a whisper through the tense silence. Silas moved to stand at the back, a shadow among the spectators, his presence a silent promise of defiance. Lily, however, walked forward, a lone figure in her dust-stained dress, her head held high. Every eye in the room, from the fearful gaze of the defendant to the cold, assessing stare of Judge Cole, turned to her. A gasp rippled through the room. They knew her face from the wanted posters. They knew the name Lily Belle, but they believed she was a fugitive, not an avenging angel. Judge Cole's smile faltered, replaced by a flicker of disbelief, then a cold, venomous fury. "Lily Belle," he snarled, his voice echoing through the stunned silence. "You dare show your face in my court? Bailiff, arrest this fugitive!" But Lily didn't flinch. She faced him, her eyes burning with a fire that eclipsed the court's gaslights. "I ain't no fugitive, Judge," she said, her voice clear and steady, cutting through the thick air. "I'm here for justice, for Hope's Haven, and for every soul you've crushed under your law." Cole laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "Preposterous! This woman is a common thief, a soiled creature who defies the very order I uphold." "Order?" Lily retorted, her voice rising, gaining strength with every word. "Your order is built on lies and stolen hope." She turned to the terrified clerk they'd brought. "Mr. Davies, tell them how the judge altered the orphanage ledgers. Tell them how he forced them into debt just to take their land." Davies, pale as a ghost, trembled. Cole's gaze, sharp and predatory, fixed on him. "Silence, clerk! This is treason!" But then, Mrs. Albright stepped forward, her frail frame trembling, yet her voice, surprisingly strong, joined Lily's. "It's true. He drove us to ruin. He'd been squeezing us for years." A murmur rippled through the room. Doubt began to prick at the town's ingrained fear. Cole's face darkened, a mask of fury. "This is a fabrication, a conspiracy by a bad egg and her desperate accomplices." His hand darted under his bench, a familiar glint of metal. But Silas was faster. He moved like a striking snake, a blur of motion from the back of the room. Before Cole's hand could clear leather, Silas's Colt was out, aimed squarely at the judge's heart. The click of the hammer echoed like thunder. The entire courtroom froze. Cole's eyes, wide with shock, locked onto Silas's. No longer merely a bounty hunter, Silas was now the executioner of false justice. His presence, an unspoken threat, filled the room. No one moved. The air crackled with raw, untamed power. Lily seized the moment. "You call me a thief? You who steals breath from children and land from the honest poor? You who twisted the law into a rope to hang the innocent?" She produced a sheaf of papers, snatched from Cole's own office earlier. Here's the original deed to Hope's Haven, signed by your father. And here, she slapped down another paper, is the falsified tax lien, signed by your own hand, Judge, dated after the true debt was paid. The murmuring in the room turned into a roar. Accusations, gasps, outrage. The clerk, emboldened by Silas's unblinking aim, blurted out details of Cole's manipulation. Man Hemlock roared his own tales of lost claims and shadowy dealings. The edifice of Judge Cole's authority crumbled, not with a bang, but with the damning weight of truth, piece by painstaking piece. Cole, cornered, dropped his gun with a clatter. His face, once so arrogant, contorted into a mask of pure, desperate rage. "You'll regret this," he shrieked, no longer the composed judge, but a terrified beast caught in a trap. He made a desperate lunge, not for his gun, but for Lily, a last pathetic attempt to silence the truth with brute force. Silas moved, a whisper of motion. His Colt didn't fire. Instead, the heavy barrel swung, a swift, brutal arc, connecting with the side of Cole's head. The judge crumpled, a silent heap of silk and broken pride. Justice, raw and unpolished, had found its mark. The courtroom erupted, not with fear, but with a sudden collective cheer, a release of pent-up anger and relief. The town marshal, a man of quiet integrity who had long suffered under Cole's thumb, stepped forward. He knelt, checking Cole, then rose, a grim satisfaction on his face. "He's alive," he said, looking at Silas, "but he ain't judging nobody anymore." The implicit understanding passed between them. The bounty for Lily Belle was forgotten. The justice, though unconventional, was clear. Lily stood amidst the chaos, the papers still clutched in her hand, her shoulders slumping with the sudden release of tension. The fight was over. The truth had burst forth like a raging river, washing away the dirt of lies. She looked at Silas, her eyes green and bright, reflecting the fierce, unwavering light of a new dawn. He saw it, too. The end of one road and the beginning of another. The West had a way of demanding a reckoning, and for Silas Creed, the score was finally settled. For Lily Belle, her name was cleared, her honor restored. The children of Hope's Haven were safe. The next steps, unwritten, beckoned with a fragile, beautiful promise. The West was a harsh mistress, forever etching its lessons onto the souls of men and women. But sometimes, even in its vast, unforgiving heart, a path could be found. A path of redemption, a path of purpose, a path where a shadow could finally find light, and a once soiled dove could soar free, not settling, but forever riding towards the open horizon, together. If this tale of grit and ghosts touched your heart, if you felt the dust in the wind and the quiet strength of two souls finding redemption, then you're riding with the right company. Because out here in the Wild West, every scar tells a story, and every new dawn brings a chance for a different kind of justice. Which moment hit hardest, when Silas faced the Grime brothers in the dust storm, or when Lily Belle stood against Judge Cole in the courtroom and spoke her truth? Let me know in the comments section. Smash. like if their fight made you breathe a little deeper and drop a comment with the line that stayed in your bones. Next time, saddle up for The Call of the Prairie, where a widowed ranch owner battles not just the relentless sun and a merciless drought, but a ruthless gang that steals her last hope. Can one woman defy the unforgiving land and the darkest hearts of men? And what happens when the outlaw meant to break her becomes the one who helps her rise? Watch as she pushes beyond survival, fighting for her land and her children against all odds. Expect fierce resilience, found family forged in the crucible of hardship, and a trial by fire that reveals the true cost of staying alive. Subscribe and ring the bell so you don't miss a spark of this haunting tale of strength, survival, and the woman who would not surrender.